The Pietermaritzburg High Court has set down former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution of State Prosecutor Billy Downer and journalist Karyn for the 2nd of February 2023. Now, the two stand accused of colluding to disclose the contents of Zuma's medical records. On the 8th and 9th of December, the court will hear applications by Downer, the prosecutor in Zuma's ongoing arms deal corruption case, and Maughan to have the charges against them dismissed as an abuse of process. Let's unpack this matter with legal expert Tyrone Maseko. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. It was a brief appearance yesterday which saw this matter being postponed to next year, pending, of course, the finalization of the bids from advocate Billy Downer and Karyn to have the summonses they were served with last month set aside. It looks like there's still a long way to go before there's some finality to this matter. What are the very strong likelihoods that could emerge in this case?
Good afternoon, Paul. Yeah, matters are getting very complicated now. Recall that all of this really stems from what is initially a prosecution against Jacob Zuma for all those corruption charges and more. And now you have this sideshow of the private prosecution, which the National Director of Public Prosecutions has decided not to pursue against Billy Downer. And what that tells me, because remember, it's very important to remember that this matter has been considered by the NPA as to whether there is prima facie evidence against this Billy Downer of the commission of a crime, and they found that there are no prospects of a successful prosecution, that there's no evidence of any wrongdoing here. That tells me that this prosecution, this private prosecution, is unlikely to succeed, and the problem is what at stake in the bigger picture here is that it has the effect of delaying the prosecution against Jacob Zuma, because you've got all these processes all running at once and causing a lot of confusion. So in the end, it actually does not matter whether the private prosecution is successful or not. The effect that it would have had is that it would have delayed the prosecution of Jacob Zuma in the main trial.
With what you're saying, do you think that this court action could then be regarded as an abuse of process on the former president's end, if the outcome is as strong as you are predicting?
And that's exactly what the defense in the private prosecution, at least Karyn's defense, is alleging. Look, this is a waste of time and it's an abuse of process. And that's where it also gets complex as well, because you've got this private prosecution, and within the private prosecution as well, there are interlocutory applications which effectively are trying to set aside this entire process. Recall that what was discussed yesterday was this issue of the urgent application that had been brought by both the first accused and the second accused in this matter, in which they say, or at least the second accused says that as a matter of urgency, we'd like the courts to look at the summons that has been issued against the second accused and the first accused, I suppose, and set it aside. And if that were to happen, then there wouldn't be a prosecution. Remember that they get brought to court to face this private prosecution by means of what we call a J175, essentially a summons that calls you to appear in court. If you set that aside, then you're not appearing in court. And so they themselves have got their own substantive application in which they're asking the court to say, look, this is an abuse of process. Please look at it and set it aside. And if that process is successful, then they don't have to deal with these charges. But, I'm not going to go into the options that the private prosecution could have, because they could do this again and do it slightly differently. But substantively, if they were to succeed in that what was an urgent application, then the private prosecution would go away. So now you're dealing with these many processes. You've got the interlocutory application in the private prosecution, you've got the private prosecution, and you've got Jacob Zuma's main trial. And the interplay between all of that is going to be interesting to see, but I don't expect that the private prosecution is going to be successful. No.
With the former president going to court in person as a free man, at least for now, over this case relating to what he's described as the leaking of a confidential medical note, what would then happen in the instance should Zuma end up being successful in the end? What would it mean for his arms deal corruption case?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that earlier. In this sense, in fact, it actually really wouldn't have. It would have a delaying effect on the main trial, but it would not make the main trial go away. Because what they're seeking to do through this process is they want to say, look, you, Billy Downer, are compromising bias and all these allegations that they've made. Remember, they've made this before in court when they tried to have him removed and that was unsuccessful. And now they trying the same process through the back door. Effectively, if they were to be successful, what they would then be able to argue is that Billy Downer is convicted and has been found by a court to be impugned in his conduct and in relation to the proceedings against Jacob Zuma, the criminal proceedings against Jacob Zuma, and so he's not fit to try him, as it were. And the National Prosecuting Authority would then have to remove him from the main trial and replace him with another prosecutor, which would delay proceedings. And that's really the most that they can get out of this process.
In delaying those proceedings, would that essentially mean that it all begins from scratch, or would this new prosecutor now continue with the work of Advocate Billy Downer?
Yeah, no, it's unlikely to begin from scratch. Remember, there will be a lot of witnesses, there have been a lot of work that has been done here. That work is not going to go away. And I can tell you now that in a case of this magnitude, it is not possible. It's simply unlikely, and as a matter of fact, it is not the case that Billy Downer would conduct it on his own. He's the senior prosecutor in the NPA. Yes, one who's about to retire, but he's still the senior prosecutor in the NPA. So he's going to have a lot of assistance. So there are a lot of people involved in this matter. A lot of people who know prosecutors, who know the evidence, what needs to be done. The difficulty is that you would really be losing capacity. He's the main prosecutor in the matter, so you'd have to get someone else it could be Breitenberg, it could be anyone who has intimate knowledge of the matter to then take over as the main prosecutor, as it were, and then you get other people to assist him. And so that may and it's a decision that the National Director of Public Prosecutions will have to make. Because remember, they want to present the case as best as they can, and Billy Downer knows this case very, very well, but it's not to say he's the only person who could conduct the criminal proceedings.
Very well. Thank you so much. Let's leave it there for now. Stalingrad tactics there. Of course, legal expert Tyrone Maseko speaking about the likelihoods of what transpired very briefly in the Pietermaritzburg High Court.